On episode 658 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Philip Pape and discuss all things hormones. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/658. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. Each week, we dive deep into health and fitness topics that affect those of us over 40. I'm Coach Allen. I'm an NASM certified personal trainer with specializations in corrective exercise, behavior change, performance enhancement, and fitness nutrition. A Precision Nutrition Level 1 coach, a FAI certified functional age-linked specialist, and an OTA Level 2 online trainer. Each week, I'm joined by our co-host, Coach Rachel. She is an NASM certified personal trainer and a RRCA Level 1 run coach. Let us be your coaches as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. One of the key things I've done as a coach is to always be learning and doing better. I surround myself with other top coaches and mentors, and each year I refine the way I coach to make 40 Plus Fitness better and better. Each year I grapple with renaming the program. I've used names like 8 Weeks to Wow, the GAS program, Be Fit for Task, and most recently, the Shed the Weight program. They all started as an idea, an approach to coaching. Each had an element of customization for the client, and as I've gone, the amount of customization has increased. My newest program is practically all customized to the client. As I was bouncing around names, I was stuck. Christina's program is Christina's program, and Kyle's program is Kyle's program. So I'm relaunching my coaching program as the Your Name Here program. It works like this. We'll get on a discovery and planning call, and we will design a program for you on the spot. Your goals equals your program. For this launch, I'm offering some significant bonuses for a limited time. We can go into those during your call. As you might imagine, there are only so many planning calls I can take. So I'm setting up an application process. This will let you know if the Your Name Here program is right for you. Go to 40plusfitness.com/apply. If you're ready to start winning this battle that so many of us are losing, go to 40plusfitness.com/apply to get started today. Hey, Raz, how are you?
Good, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. We launched the workshop this week, so that's going on, and it's gonna. I mean, I'm so excited right now. You know, we're recording this beforehand. And it's just really been just kind of developing it and putting it all together. I'm really, really proud of this workshop. I really am. And so that's going on. And in that workshop, I'm making an announcement. I'm revamping my program. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the new program that I'm launching now is pretty darn special. And there's some bonuses associated with it now it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to get you the results you want. So
awesome.
If you've been thinking about, I got to do something, and you put it off till September because, school and everything else, this is the time. This is the time to reach out and let me know that you're interested in learning more about it. But yeah, it's the bonuses just by themselves are so special, making this so much more valuable that this is the time. If you're going to do it now, because I can't keep these bonuses. So when I stop this launch, that's it. So reach out to me if you're interested, coach at 40plusfitness.com, and we can talk about the program and whether it's a good fit for you. But
that sounds awesome.
I'm really excited about it.
Great. Glad to hear it, Alan. Excited for your clients.
Yeah. And we're also working through the music to figure out the new music, if we're going to do new music. There were some votes in a Facebook group. If you're not a member of the group, that's the best place to go because that's where I'm doing the voting. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group. That will take you to the group, request to enter, and then I'm going to have a new post because I initially put 5 songs out there, and I got the initial batch of votes. And so we can keep the new music, keep the music we have if that's what you'd like, or I'm narrowing it down to the top three. So the new video that will be out there starting today is going to be just the top three of the previous voting. So there's still an opportunity for you to be involved in helping us make this a really good place to be. Music you enjoy listening to on the kickoff part of this show, and then at the end, the full version of it. So I'm interested to see what you think. So I'm excited. People are coming out there and into the music and liking them and making comments about what they like and what they don't like. So it's pretty cool. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, very cool. That sounds awesome.
All right. So what's going on in your corner of the world?
Not too much. It's actually been quiet. Last weekend, Mike and I were camping, and at the campsite we were at, there was no cell service. Couldn't send a text, which means I couldn't receive a text, couldn't get online, couldn't check my socials. It was 100% peace and quiet. I could not have been happier.
Excellent. That is, yeah. The digital detox is something I think people overlook and might actually be a little afraid of, being out of contact and out of connection. I live in a third world country, so yeah, stuff goes down, power goes down, internet goes down.
Yeah,
I relish those moments. That's when I that's when I reach over here and I grab one of these, a paper book. They still make these, they still print these. Can you believe it? And I'll sit down and start reading because I can't do it. Most things you have to have the internet for it to even work. You don't have the apps on your computer much anymore, so. Yeah. I can't get my work done. I may as well learn something new or enjoy my day. So I pick up a book and I love it too.
Nice. Very nice. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Are you ready to have a conversation with Philip Pape?
Sure.
Our guest today is the owner and head coach at Wits and Weights Nutrition Coaching. He is the host of the Wits and Weights podcast, where he cuts through the noise and deconstructs health and fitness with an engineering mindset. Known as the physique engineer, he helps individuals in their 30s and 40s and beyond transform their physiques by building muscle, losing fat, breaking through plateaus, and optimizing their hormones and metabolism without restrictive diets, excessive cardio, boring workouts, or sacrificing their valuable time and lifestyle. With no further ado, here's Philip Pape. Philip, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Alan, thank you so much for the opportunity. Great to be here.
So I'm doing a little bit of research on you, try to figure out, okay, who is this guy? And I come across your page and it says you're the physique engineer. So let's dive into that a little bit. What's that one?
That's one of those self-made monikers. But my background's actually in engineering, software engineering, project engineering, engineering management. And I talk about on my podcast all the time, taking the principles of engineering and applying them to nutrition, to training, and to developing our physique. So it's evidence-based, but it's like, how do engineers think? How do they design? How do they break things apart and use data and feedback to, ultimately get better results? So that's where it comes from.
Yeah. I worked for a company. I worked for software companies, but I also worked for some physical engineering companies. One of them was in oil and gas, and it was always fascinating. I always enjoyed the conversations with engineers across the board. They just have it. They have a different way of thinking. They're looking at a problem and they're saying, okay, I've got to solve this problem. And so it is a different way. I remember I was out on a floating platform in the middle of the South Asia Sea, and there were these ropes. They were 18 inches in diameter. So really, really big, thick ropes. And they were holding the two pieces together. And so the deal was they were supposed to be going through this pulley system, all 8 ropes. And the pulleys weren't turning the way they were supposed to turn. And as a result, it was wearing the ropes. And one of them broke. And they go ahead and they contact the manufacturer and say, okay, we need another one of these little ropes to replace the rope that just broke. And they're like, that's not how rope making works. We have to make one long rope and cut it into 8 sections so they all have the same tensile strength. If you put one rope in there that wasn't made with that batch, then you won't have the same. So they're like, okay, well, then we won't need to order 8 new ropes. And so, but in the meantime, they're like, we can't just let this platform just sort of flop around out there because it was also responsible for drilling. So it had to be stabilized. So they decide, well, the only solution we have is to tie this thing in a knot. Can you imagine the engineering that's required to be
For
sitting
that
on a
size
floating
of
platform and take an 18-inch rope and tie it into a knot? So again, yeah. And then of course the engineers, when I worked at 3Com, they would, as soon as an engineer would leave, the new engineer would come and he needed more RAM. So we were looking at the RAM purchases and we're like, okay, something's not adding up here. And what we realized was happening was the engineers were all pilfering the RAM out of out of the new computer when someone left. You know, they would leave and all the engineers would just seize on all that RAM that they had and leave the new guy coming in with not enough RAM. So he would make the request for RAM. Every new guy was requesting RAM, even when he was using the same machine. And so now we couldn't just look at serial numbers when we were doing inventory. We literally had to open up every machine to see how much RAM was supposed to be in there and whether it had more RAM than it was supposed to. So yeah.
You know, it's funny. There's so many funny engineering stories I could say, but like people do not understand what goes into the things that we make and that they depend on oftentimes for their lives. Like in an airplane, there's so many computers, right? And the computers have to be hardened against cosmic rays because a ray from the sun could flip a bit in the computer and cause the software to fail, right? It's like little things like that. And so when I look at the human body, I'm like, that's actually pretty easy to like train and eat well and like do the things we talk about here in comparison. So kind of takes the pressure off and, you know.
But it does follow that because like I'll have the conversation with someone. I'm like, okay, food is information. Mm-hmm. Your body takes what you eat, the quality of it, the quantity of it, the nutrients that are in it, and it starts making decisions based on the programming your body has. And so you're either feeding it good information that food is plentiful, there's plenty of nutrition, or you're feeding it bad information that food is scarce or the quality of our food isn't what it's supposed to be. And nowhere is this really more apparent than hormones because our hormones are the messengers that kind of carry that whole thing out. As we get older, I think it's pretty clear for women because they get into perimenopause, which can last up to 10 years, menopause, which is going to last for the rest of your life. So they see that change as almost an abrupt end and restart at some level. I mean, it depends on the perimenopause. It can go longer. With men, it's a little bit more of a slowly gliding in thing. We don't even feel it. The water's boiling and we don't even know. Let's talk about a little bit about those changes and what they actually mean for us from a health and fitness perspective.
Yeah, like you said, hormones, they're one of those misunderstood things, kind of like gut health today, right? There's a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation. Before I get into that, like we use hormones as this doomsday scenario, especially at women that I work with, where once you hit 40, right, or once you hit perimenopause, everything just declines and it's a new phase of life where nothing works. My metabolism's broken. I don't have the energy. Like it's almost a defeatist kind of thinking because we give so much credence to the hormones. Now we're going to talk about what actually changes. I like to flip that around, like reframe it and say, this is a huge opportunity and a wake up call to actually optimize our lifestyle, knowing that when we do that, the things that we probably should have been doing since we were in our 20s, but our bodies like didn't give us the feedback that we necessarily needed it back then. It can largely mitigate many of those changes. And so I always like to start there and say, women, men, doesn't matter. If you're making the choices you need to make, the hormone situation is much less of a variable unless, you have a medical condition or something like that. But it is true, like women, peri and postmenopause are seeing a decline in estrogen, in progesterone. They get all the symptoms that we can't relate to, like hot flashes and mood swings, weight gain. Guys who are married, you've got to be very empathetic to your wives, oftentimes on a cyclical basis, right? And when you don't have things like strength training and the other stuff we're going to talk about in place, for women especially, it leads to things like more visceral fat storage, more bone density loss, more muscle mass loss, and it's faster for them than it is for men. And that's where the frustration often comes from. And then they have DHEA, they have growth hormone. Both men and women have testosterone, right? So we see all of that, Alan, from women's perspective. And the industry loves to play off of that and like sell products for menopausal women, right? We know that because of that. But we'll get into what you can do instead where you probably don't have to worry about, replacement therapy as early as you might think and all of that. Men, it's testosterone. I mean, it really does come down to that. We're actually pretty simple. It just starts to decline for some men sooner than others, as well as DHEA. And it could affect your mood. It could affect your sex drive. It could affect your muscle mass. And so if you have symptoms, I would suggest getting, or even if you don't have symptoms, I would suggest getting a number early on, like in your 30s as a baseline, so that you can see where it trends over time. And if you have to deal with it later, you'll have the information. So yeah, that's the big picture, Alan.
Yeah. And I think the couple things that I'd like to bring out there is that a lot of folks don't know this, but both men and women have testosterone, produce testosterone. For women, it's much less, obviously, but it does impact their capacity to lift weights and how they feel. It affects their libido, and all those different triggers and things that it does in our body. You can stop producing it too. Men will slowly, so for women, it's menopause. For men, we refer to as andropause. But we're all going through this this aging curve, and if we don't do anything, we're just free riding wherever this thing's going to take me. It's going to take me, but it's always downhill. So yeah, and we need to do something. So I'd like to start that conversation, kind of talking about nutrition, because I think that there's an underappreciation for how much nutrition actually does for us or against us. I think we know we eat too much, we gain weight, but I think that's the line where people kind of just say, okay, that's all you really need to know, but there's more.
For sure. I mean, I think of nutrition as a few different things. You mentioned gaining and losing weight. So there is the energy balance piece. And oftentimes that has a greater impact on our hormones than necessarily what we eat. People like to go straight to hormone supporting foods. And I like to start from, are you even eating enough and supplying the energy you need, especially if you're lifting weights and you're training, right? So energy balance is important. Calories are important. Then we have our micronutrients. And that is where, yes, healthy fats, having enough fat, especially for women, is important. Having enough carbs is important. See, a lot of people are on low carb diets, and we'll find that maybe a moderate to high carb diet might support their hormones better and in the older age group, which again is a big source of misinformation in the industry. And then we have our micronutrients and fiber to kind of round it out, having that diverse diet that supports your gut. Our gut health becomes more and more critical as we age. And guess what? The gut is very closely attuned to our hormones, both the direct hormones in our intestinal system that affect things like hunger and cravings. You hear of GLP-1, right? It's one of those, the peptides affects that hormone, but also are linked to our pituitary gland, our adrenal system, all the other hormones, cortisol, stress, everything else. So nutrition has a much bigger impact than we think. But I think if you are supporting your goals and listening to the feedback, as we talked about earlier, like an engineer, if you're gathering the data on how does my stomach feel? Do I have bloating? Do I have gas? How's my hunger? How's my performance in the gym? We can tie that back to the food choices you make without having to cut carbs, cut this, cut that. So that's where I would start.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about protein, because I do think that, there's concern about eating too much protein. There's concern about not eating enough protein. Where do you stand on that?
Most people aren't eating enough. I think you stand there too, right? Like, the evidence doesn't show that you could really eat too much protein, to be honest. And if you did eat that much protein, I'd love to see your diet, because I don't think it would be super sustainable. You'd be basically just eating pure chicken breast all day. Yeah. So I don't think you can have too much. I think most people are under consuming probably half. And I'm sure you've talked about the guidelines. The RDA guidelines tend to be woefully inadequate compared to what especially aging individuals, especially women, need to support muscle protein synthesis and at least preserve muscle, if not build new muscle tissue. And so it's in that like 0.7 to 1 gram per pound is usually the number we throw out.
Yeah, it's kind of the funny thing is these standards will be out there, and you'll see it on the sheet, on the back of the label, and you'll say, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and this is where I'm supposed to be, and this is what the government says. No, that's what the government says you need just to stay alive. Yeah. That's not an optimal way to live your life, by government standards, because it's obviously not going to serve you in the long run. I think one of the other things that's key with this, because again, I think one of the reasons people struggle so much with protein is the other information that's out there that they got to try to avoid. Like, I don't want the cholesterol. I don't want the saturated fat. And if I eat the saturated fat, then my cholesterol is going to go up and all that. So tell us a little bit about that area, what your thoughts are there.
So there's a whole bucket of things like that. Seed oils, saturated fat, you name it. I think if you have a diverse diet that's like 80% whole foods, you're probably far beyond what most people are in terms of having the right balance of things in there. I will say you can have too much of things like saturated fat. You could definitely go a little bit overboard if you have a very high meat-based diet. And if that's the case, you probably look at data, and if your lipids are higher than they should be, maybe that's an opportunity. But I don't like to fearmonger with any of this stuff. Definitely seed oils, artificial sweeteners, like they can be in your diet. Again, you have to listen to your feedback, your biofeedback, and you have to see what it's doing for you. But man, if you're lifting weights, if you're eating lots of protein, if you're getting the energy, those things become much less of a concern, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think 80-20 is a good place to be for a general maintenance. But I say if you're trying to make some substantial change in your life, you're going to need to go a little harder than that, at least for a period of time. Get your body clean, get your body moving right. Because, and you mentioned it earlier, it's like if we're eating the wrong foods or things that our body really actually doesn't know is food, if it's messing with our microbiome because of the things that we're eating, we're not getting enough fiber, we're not getting enough protein, we're going to put ourselves in a state of inflammation, in many cases chronic inflammation. And that's a cytokine storm. That's the cortisol going up, and cortisol is catabolic. So it's going to make it very hard for you to put on muscle. And it's going to be very likely that you're actually putting on fat in the one place where we don't want to put fat, which is our belly. And for women that are in menopause, that's some of the change, is that stress and everything that's going on in your body. That's where that fat's going to end up now that you're wired slightly differently than you were before you went into menopause.
Let's talk about this a little more, because I like that you challenged me a bit, and I can communicate a little bit better where I'm coming from here. So most people are consuming 60 to 70% processed foods in this country, right?
Yeah. If
I can get you to consume 80%, that gets you from your 20 to 80%, efficacy, let's say, minimum effective dose. But you're right in saying that we eat a lot of things that just don't work for us as individuals. And the only way you can tell what those are is something like an elimination diet. It doesn't have to be extreme, but, kind of backing off on certain things that you may find are trigger foods or think are trigger foods. And believe it or not, that could include something like broccoli, even though we think of that as a perfectly healthy food. Some individuals have a negative reaction to it. So I agree, Alan. There's like a spectrum. It depends on who your client is and who we're talking to as a population. What I find is people will go right to the 1% solution first, and they'll just start cutting everything out, but they don't get enough protein, and they're not lifting weights, and they're not sleeping at least 7. You know what I mean? And that's where we get into the kind of, my approach is more, let's do the big rock, then the medium rock, then the small rock. But I don't disagree that there are inflammatory foods, and you don't want to eat more ultra processed foods and more triggering foods than you should.
Yeah. Because sometimes it works like this. You sit there and it's, Girl Scout season, and you eat a whole sleeve of Thin Mints. Yes, it's happened.
Okay. What's the chocolate coconut ones? Yeah.
Yeah, it's happened. But what happens then is, because your body started tasting the sugar, it started thinking something sweet was going to come with all the minerals and vitamins that would normally come with something like that. And you get through, and your body's like, well, I didn't get the nutrition I really thought I was going to get. I want more. Now we're interpreting it more cookies, but that's not what our body was actually telling us. Is like, okay, there's supposed to be some vitamins and minerals in this stuff you're eating. So where is it? So I do think that we do have to recognize that, what 80-20 really is. It's not Girl Scout cookies. Okay, so my calories for the week, 20% of it was Girl Scout cookies. It's still generally trying to make sure you're giving your body the nutrition it needs.
It's interesting in that case. So I'm going to reverse engineer it.
There you go.
And if somebody were to be eating that way, let's say it was a client of mine, and they would be tracking things like hunger. They're also tracking the amount of fiber they get. Something's probably going to be off in that equation. Like they're not going to feel great with their digestion, or they're going to have more hunger because they're eating this ultra processed food that doesn't fill them up. And so if you kind of account for the whole picture, the satiety, the fiber, some micronutrients you're tracking, I find it tends to work for a lot of people that way, as opposed to trying to force it necessarily.
Yeah.
It's the same end result, Alan, is what I'm getting at. And I totally agree. We have to have the micronutrient diversity, right? We have to have the fiber, the satiety. I want you to feel satisfied, but not emotionally, not through emotional craving satisfaction, but through, hey, I'm full. My digestion's good. I can wake up in the morning after a restful night of sleep and I can hit the gym and get all the reps. If anything's missing from that equation, then maybe there's a problem there.
All right. So let's move to the gym. We're going to be working out. We want to lose weight. Most folks would be in the state of saying, I want to lose weight. I'm adding more fat to my belly. I know my muscle mass is going down. So I know the 20 pounds I gained in the last 2 years. I know that's not muscle. I'm not going to argue and I'm going to lie to myself that it's muscle. I know it's fat. And I know if I'm losing muscle and I'm gaining fat and I'm getting heavier, that's not a really good route that you want to take towards old age. What types of movement and how much should we be considering as a plan, or at least a starting plan to get going?
Number one for me is always going to be building muscle, strength training, resistance training of some kind. I don't care who you are, how old you are, what limitations you have. I knew a guy, Kevin McShann, who is in wheelchair. He lifts weights. Like, you pretty much don't have an excuse. But more importantly, from the positive perspective, lifting weights is so health centered, more than people give it credit for. Hormones, yes, right? Lifting weights can increase growth hormone and testosterone. We also know it improves your metabolic health. We also know it counteracts frailty and loss of bone density and all of that. So, and it increases insulin sensitivity. Like, again, another thing people aren't always aware of, that muscles sink for glucose. So you can have a little bit more variety in your diet. You can have the carbs and you're supporting your activity. So that's the activity I'm going to start with, number one. Number two would be just general movement. I think people need to be off their butt for a decent part of the day, whether that's walking. I'm not too specific about it other than getting enough activity, because, cardio is not going to kill your gains. You can walk as much as you want. Just get up, because being sedentary and sitting is its own risk factor, its own factor for mortality and disease. So lifting weights, moving, and not being sedentary are a good place to start.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people lose in this whole math is they go with the concept that more is better. And when we're talking about hormones, that's not always the case.
Okay. Is that a question? Sorry.
Yeah, that's sort of a question. I didn't ask it like a question, but I
was giving you the space. You could edit out the
but you kind of get the idea. So yeah. Tell me your thoughts on that, the volume.
So more in terms of training for hormones. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, for sure. No, I'm a huge fan of time efficiency and efficiency of movement here. That's why I love compound lifts, right? That's why I love big, full functional natural movements like the squatting, pressing, lift, picking things up with your deadlift, hinging, overhead, etc. But not just because they use the most muscle mass and let you lift heavy weights, but they're super time efficient. You could do a couple of those or 3 of those in a session that lasts 45 minutes and do that 3 times a week. And for most people, that gets you into the range of, the 5 to 10 sets per muscle group per week. That's like the minimum for busy people. Beyond that, 3 or 4 days, having a little bit of extra in there is great. But a lot of people overdo it with the cardio, right? They're doing 3-4 days, an hour plus on whatever, elliptical, running, stair stepper, and then they might lift 2 days or they might not be lifting at all. And that could definitely backfire in terms of cortisol when we talk about hormones. Yeah. Too much stress, not recovering enough, having too much muscle tearing when you're doing like loaded cardio, like we see in CrossFit, boot camps, things like that. I could go on, but it is a good balance of mostly lifting, some walking, a little bit of cardio, and getting plenty of sleep and rest.
Yeah, I think the sleep and rest is kind of one of the key components there. More is not necessarily going to be better. So beyond movement and nutrition, those are the 2 core areas I think we should be focused to get rolling. Once we get that kind of stabilized, what are some other areas we can be working on to improve our hormone profile and feel better and feel younger?
You mentioned belly fat before, which is a big concern of women, especially. They even have a term, they call it menopause belly.
Yeah.
And men have the beer gut. It's really the same phenomenon. It's either hormonally related or stress related from hormones. And in women's cases, the estrogen has a kind of a fat storage effect. And the ways to mitigate that are stress management and sleep, right? It's not going to be rocket science. Alan probably talks about it in 600 plus episodes, probably 300 of those episodes. I'm sure you've said like, you guys just got to sleep. We have seen plenty of studies that show sleep deprivation, which is typically less than 5.5 hours or so of sleep, can lead to greater visceral fat storage. So your fat distribution changes. Also, cravings go way up, your hunger hormones go up, right? Leptin, ghrelin change so that your body says, I need to eat because you're not giving me the sleep. So I'm going to make up for it over here with the food. So just getting more sleep and managing stress can go a massive way toward mitigating some of the hormonal, issues.
Yeah. Now, we talk a little bit here about losing weight, and, typically I don't like talking about it from weight, but I've in 9+ years of doing this, what I've found is I can't just say fat loss, because no one's gonna pay any attention if we were just talking fat loss. But this is what we really want to try to do. If we're carrying excess fat, it's producing estrogen. That's one of the other things that fat does. It's not just this benign thing that's hanging on our body, making us look and feel bad. It actually does produce estrogen. So guys, that's where those moobs are coming from. It's it's your body basically saying, I got all this extra estrogen, all this extra fat, and the fat's just producing this estrogen. And you not only you have less testosterone if you're not training and trying to get rid of that body fat, your body's actively trying to find new places to store it. And your chest is one of those.
Yeah, I mean, rather than try to like address hormone issues directly, we address these lifestyle things that cascade to helping your hormones. And some of them have a big bang for your buck, right? Like stress. I mean, chronic stress is just so high these days. And the older we get, we have families, we have life obligations, women who are, taking care of their household. Lifting weights can counteract that. In fact, lifting weights is the number one factor for improved sleep quality as well, according to some studies. But one hack that I really like is lifting in the morning. I used to be ambivalent about it, or kind of neutral. And I would say, look, just lift weights when you can. And some people would even say that lifting later in the day is slightly more beneficial. But what we find is whatever time of day you lift, if it's consistent, you'll adapt. But secondly, doing it in the morning has shown to be beneficial for cortisol, especially in older individuals, just because it, for lack of a better phrase, kind of burns off the cortisol, or it sets you up for proper movement early in the day, like we're supposed to. And then your cortisol kind of ramps down and then gets you ready for sleep later on. So just a nice little hack there.
Yeah, excellent. So what are some things we should avoid if we're trying to manage our hormones better?
Okay, so I wasn't going to go here. I don't know what you think, Alan, about just toxins in the environment and plastics and personal care products and all of that. Like, I used to be one of those, like, I file it in the woo category. I'm just curious of your thoughts on that before I go down that path.
Well, it's a couple different things. Okay, everything that goes into our body is information, but beyond that, our liver is maybe one of the most intelligent things in our body besides our gut and our brain. And the reason is that the liver has to fix everything. It has to fix everything. And so if we've got these toxins in our body, the liver has to process it. Okay. When you drink alcohol, the body has to process that first. So it shifts all resources to doing that, meaning your body's not necessarily doing other things that it should be doing. So that's one break in your whole metabolic process, is the toxins are messing with the systems that keep you alive and keep you healthy. The other side of it is, because the liver is such a smart organ, it knows that while you're over here putting on extra fat, that's a really cool place to shuttle that stuff off to and just say goodbye to it. And if you have a kind of a history of gaining more than you lose each time you lose weight and gain it back, that's what it's going to do. It's a repetitive process. So let's just store it there. Let's just store it there. And so you end up with, and I just had this interview with a doctor not long ago, sick fat. You end up with the body that has very large fat cells and a lot of toxic crud in them, and that causes dysfunction of those fat cells. So it is hard, if not impossible, to avoid all of these toxins. It just is. But to the extent that you can know, okay, I know that, like, weed killer, glyphosate, or whatever it's called.
Glyphosate, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, we know, okay, yes, it does a great job of killing weeds and us.
It's an endocrine disruptor. Yeah, exactly. It goes right to the hormones.
And so I think there is a balance, and this is probably where the 80-20 rule makes the most sense, because if you aren't paying any attention to what's in your skincare products, your hair care products, of course, I just use shaving cream, but
plastic containers, yeah,
yeah, or you're cleaning,
right?
Or where you're drinking your water from, and how that's handled. Even just our municipal water supplies and what could possibly be in those. And so I think there's just a lot of opportunity there for us to think about, can I clean up these things a little? Because if we can reduce the amount that we're exposed to, we give our body a better shot at hitting it and keeping up with it and keeping us healthier longer.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I brought it up, because normally, again, talk about the bigger things. You mentioned alcohol. I could have gone there. Like, reducing alcohol only has upside for hormones. We talked about overtraining. We talked about getting enough sleep. So I was like, where's the other thing that people are curious about? And I was thinking of that because we've seen, just in my generation alone, fertility rates skyrocket, and perimenopause coming on earlier, and you're like, what's going on? And there are some links with some of these endocrine disruptors in the environment, and it's not a woo thing. Like, everything is manufactured, and there's so much plastic and chemicals used. Like you said, it's just being aware and kind of being educated, but not fear mongering, just shifting, nudging yourself to make better informed decisions.
Yeah, because like, we could sit there, if we really listened to what they say, then we would think, okay, there's no way I'm eating fish. I'm not going to eat fish because there's microplastics in the ocean, and I don't want to consume the microplastics. And the reality is, yeah, there are microplastics in the ocean, but also the core and mercury and everything else. But the core is, there are some fish that are longer lived fish that eat other fish that are higher risk. So, have some swordfish now and again, but it shouldn't be a normal staple for you all the time. Sardines are a better choice because they're not the kind of species that's eating other fish. They're not a species that are going to be alive long enough to get as much exposure. So there are better choices from time to time, but it's, you need the omega-3. So don't poo-poo your health over one thing because of another thing, as scary as it might sound, microplastics and, mercury and
it's the dose.
Have some fish.
Yeah.
Have some fish.
Yeah. It's the dose. It's the dose and the exposure, right? Like, diet soda gets a bad rap, but again, I think if you drink it in moderation, it's really not going to affect you. And then same thing with like dyes and things like that. People are wondering about whey protein, for example. I get questions all the time, like, what brand of whey protein? I said, just pick the brand that has as few ingredients as you're comfortable with, or as many as you're comfortable with, but at the fewest. Because if you're eating, 8 scoops of protein powder every day, and it's the kind with artificial sweetener and red dye and everything, maybe there's some cumulative effect that you're not going to like down the road, and better safe than sorry kind of thought on that,
Yeah. And you're completely right. It's like, people will ask me, it's like, what whey protein do you usually use? And I'm like, I don't usually have to supplement protein because I eat.
There's that too, for sure.
I eat protein, and so I don't really have to do that very often. When I choose that I need to do it, or I want to do it, then I'm going to go with the purest I can get, because, and this is kind of a little known thing, is that whey protein is a byproduct. Okay. And so the dairy people, they don't need it. They don't want it. They should throw it away before we decided we were going to start using it for protein. But it's all just accumulated. It's not like there's this guy's making better whey than that guy. For the most part, they're all buying the same way. And they're putting in their product, they're adding their own flavors and preservatives and colors and all that type of thing so that they could sell you strawberry and chocolate and mocha, whatever. And then we can put it in bars and sell it to you that way. So you're just basically eating candy to get to your protein number.
It's true, because when you tell somebody, did you know they actually sell pure whey? You could just get that and then kind of flavor it yourself in a smoothie. Well, I don't like how that tastes. I'm like, well, okay, now we've got a problem here. Like,
you know, well, that's why I'll buy the grass-fed, grass-finished whey, and in a usually in a big bin. There's a few companies I trust that they're not gonna, the labels are what they say they are. And when you look on the back to the label and you turn it around, it says whey. It's the only ingredient.
Exactly.
Okay. And the other thing you can look at is, okay, so here's a scoop, and the scoop is 36 grams. And how much protein do I get?
About 36, right? Might be 35 with, yeah.
So there are ways for us to reduce the exposure. There are ways for us to improve the quality and quantity of our sleep. There are ways for us to reduce our stress load through stress management and getting negative people out of your life. And I think one of the biggest ones, and I'd like to get your take on this a little bit, is the effect that self-talk has on our hormone profile.
Oh, man. I mean, self-talk goes directly to mood, right? And to mental health. In fact, I know we're going to get to like 3 strategies to get and stay well. One of those I was going to allude to was the positivity in your life. And I use that kind of at a high level because I think everyone has different challenges, right? Some people are more optimistic. Like I have an optimism bias. And so I tend to like think things are going to go well. And so I kind of embrace that future identity idea. Some people just everything, the sky is falling all the time, right? The sky's falling all the time. And so we do know that there's a direct link with the endocrine system, with, things like endorphins, even just in the short term, with it's not the self-talk just in isolation. It's what the self-talk then leads to. It leads to kind of a lack of control, an external locus instead of an internal locus, right? The lack of choice and empowerment and agency. That's all associated with self-determination. And like, yes, I can go from here to there on my own volition. Maybe I need some support. That's great. That's fine. In fact, I encourage it. But yeah, that's where I'd say the link occurs. And so Atomic Habits, right? Everybody knows Atomic Habits by James Clear. I think in there he talks about reversing how we think of what we do and our behavior change. Instead of thinking, I need to do this to become this person, we think, I'm this person, so I'm going to do this. And that's kind of like reframing the self-talk into a positive identity. Yeah, so I think it's huge, Alan.
Yeah. Well, that's the be, do, have kind of mindset where what are the people who are like this? What do they do? Just start doing those things. And then eventually you'll be that person.
Yeah, it's huge. So there's a woman in my group coaching. She calls me the positivity bully. That's what she's been calling me lately. In all like positivity, right? But she's gotten to the point where she knows if something comes out of her mouth that's like a fixed mindset statement, like I am this, she's immediately like, wait a minute. That's not the way I meant to say it. And she'll reframe it. So I'm like, I got you trained.
Yeah, it's working. It's starting to work.
But it really is that. It's like reframing everything. And going back to being an engineer, like one of the things engineers do is they don't have failure in their vocabulary. Everything that happens is just something that teaches you what to do. So even from a day-to-day, like you could either have an all or nothing mentality where I'm a failure and then boom, I'm off my program, or this happened. What do I learn from it? And what do I do differently? And if I'm having trouble doing something differently, there's another opportunity there with friction or reward system or whatever it is that encourages me to make it easier on myself.
Well, Philip, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
All right. So fittest has got to be strength training. I just have to, like, everybody's got to do that, man. There's no excuse for hormone health, for mental health, for self-identity, all of that stuff we just talked about. So I would say, lift weights, build that muscle, be the fittest person you can be till you're 95. And like I say, you croak doing a deadlift when you're 95. That's what I want to do. That's fittest. Healthiest would be, from a nutrition standpoint, I think starting from the big rocks, like I mentioned earlier. I mean, I love everything Alan says here, getting into all the details we need to nail down eventually. Protein and fiber, I think, is a good starting place. If every meal has that, you've made a step change. And then from that point, you can start to go down the tracking and the micronutrients and everything else. And then from happiest, I think we kind of alluded to it. It's getting positivity in your life. That's people who are positive, who support you. They may not get you. They may not totally understand you. That's fine. We know how family is. But it's kind of getting rid of the toxicity, getting rid of the negatives. And one great way to do that is listening to podcasts like Alan's, joining groups online who have the same goals, and consuming positive content rather than, say, for example, the political news these days.
Yes, there is that. Thank you.
I can't help myself because it is entertaining, but yeah, it can be too much.
It is. It is too much. But all right. So, Philip, if someone wanted to learn more about you, learn more about Wits and Weights, where would you like for me to send them?
Send them to the podcast, Wits and Weights, and then they can just reach out to me at witsandweights.com.
All right. So you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/658, and I'll be sure to have links there. Philip, thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Alan, thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome back, Raz.
Hey, Alan, that was a really fun interview. Philip sounds like a really interesting person and an engineer, a physique engineer. Sometimes it takes like a different way of thinking to figure things out. I appreciate his ability to do that.
Yeah, whenever I'm working with someone, even when I was working with myself, I needed processes in place. I needed some things to make it easier, to remove friction from what I wanted to do. And I didn't have a coach at the time to help me do that. So it was like, okay, what do I do to solve this problem? Because if I want to do this, I have to solve this problem. So it was sometimes adding friction to things that I didn't want to do, and then removing friction from things that I did want to do. And very much you start talking to engineers, friction can be a big part of anything that they're doing. And so that, I totally agree that you need to have some system that you can rely on that's working for you, and developing a good system for yourself. That can be a challenge, but once you get it done, it's actually really, really nice.
Oh, absolutely. And it's our lives change over time as we age. Like you had discussed, our hormones just get out of whack. I'm going through menopause and everything is different. And so like everything that I used to do in the past needs to change to address the way my body is working today. And I think everybody that's aging is going to go through similar situations. Maybe you're prone to heart disease or diabetes, or maybe you're prone to anemia or any other thing. So then there's no one size fits all. Everybody's got to kind of troubleshoot, little problem solving on their own issues and figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, there is no one size fits all, but there are some commonalities that we all share, things we should do and things we shouldn't do. If we want to live healthy, fit lives. And so, there are some similarities, but there are, also some differences in how each of us apply those things.
And on the things that we should do, you spent some time talking about strength training and how important that is at probably every age, but most importantly, over 40.
Yeah. I would say don't strength train a kid under 10, but because they're growing and there's other things going on. But for everybody else, strength training should be core to what we do.
Oh, absolutely. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, as we do age and all of these things in our lives change, no matter how well you eat and no matter how well you exercise, if you can't manage stress and sleep, that's going to just upset the balance of everything. It's 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Yeah. Well, stress is something that is basically, in a normal situation, stress is good. I mean, if there's a bear,
right,
the stress helps you. Like if you're about to step out into a highway and there's a car coming, and all of a sudden you get this surge of energy, fight and flight, and you're able to jump back and not get hit by the car. That's that's good. I mean, you want that. You don't want to
Right.
be relaxed sloth watching a car hit you. You want
Yes.
that capacity to jump back and do the thing
Mm-hmm.
that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a world of chronic stress.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's stressors that are always there. The bear is always there. The car is always there. And we can't stay there.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to implement things that are going to allow us to manage our own stress.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as sleep is concerned, yeah, it's the cycle that helps us do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything is built on that. So if you're not sleeping well and you're not going through full sleep cycles, you're not getting what your brain needs. You're not giving what your hormones need to cycle through, because they're all set up on a cycle, a daily cycle. And so that circadian rhythm is there to tell you, okay. And so we know if you're not asleep at between 10 and 2, that's a core time that your body would be doing the things that it needs to do. And a lot of people say, I don't go to bed until 11 or 12. It's like, oh, okay, that might be a problem if you're not feeling it. If you feel like you're getting older faster than you should, you've got to get better sleep.
Better sleep for sure. And then it was always nice to hear you discuss things to avoid. I mean, certainly the toxins in the environment, that's easy. We live around too many plastics and too many chemicals like our Roundup and stuff like that. But you also mentioned alcohol, and that's kind of a controversial topic there.
Well, it can be, but it shouldn't be. I mean,
Yes.
let's face it. Okay, most people that are using alcohol consistently, like on a almost daily basis, it is their regimen for stress management. It's and I understand that. I've been in a similar situation. I was working really hard and I was stressed in my job. You go back to the hotel, there's the hotel bar, and it's like, it's nice. You have a few drinks, you forget about your day, and then you crash. The problem is that doesn't really solve the stress problem. You just increased the cortisol problem. You just, again, the stress was still there. You just, you masked it. You didn't solve it. You didn't reduce it. And then as far as sleep, if you have alcohol in your system, you're not going through proper sleep cycles. You're not getting restful sleep. So you might be unconscious for 8 hours, but you did not get 8 hours of quality sleep. And so from that perspective, it is harming you more than it's helping you in all cases. And yeah, okay, fine. Go have a couple drinks with your friends every once in a while. That's not a problem. But if you're using it as a coping mechanism, you really have to rethink that strategy, because it's not doing what you think it's doing.
No, gosh, even maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it was kind of normal for the wine industry. You'd have a glass of red wine at dinner because it's supposedly good for you in some way. And nowadays, there's just no way I could not have a glass of wine with dinner and sleep well. I just know that I'm up for a bad night of sleep if I do. But yeah, it's different, especially as you age.
Yeah. And so that's just what we have to look at is as we're trying to do this, we're providing this information to our body, the quality of our sleep, the stress management, the strength training, the eating properly, the avoiding chemicals. All of those things are information in your body to get better, to heal, to feel better. And the way it does that is through hormones. And so if you can do the right things for your body, no matter your age, you're optimizing your hormones for what it is for where you are at that point in time. And as a result, you're going to get better results. You're going to feel better. You're going to be healthier. You're going to lose weight, all those things that you want to do. You just have to dial those things in. When we're older, we have to dial them in just a little bit more than we did when we were younger. But yeah, doing the things that your body needs you to do and avoiding the things that you shouldn't be, that's all a part of this challenge and how we get where we need to be.
No, that's perfect. It was a really great conversation.
All right. Well, I will talk to you next week.
Great. Take care, Alan.
You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Barbara and Michael Grossman and discuss their book, Ageless Love, The Sexy Science of Falling in Love Forever. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.